If you enjoy listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos, consider going to patreon.com/pgttcm.com and donating $1 or $5. Thank you so much for listening. Help keep the lights on. Now, let's start this show. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Proudly presents you episode 305, Spiders. We'll be covering Atlatna Cha, The Hive, and Fritz Lang's The Spine. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Hosted by DB Spitzer. Produced by Portland Public Podcasting and DB Spitzer. I'm doing all the credits at the beginning, so we don't have to do it at the end. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. The spider as an artist has never been employed, though his surpassing merit is freely certified by every Broom and Bridget throughout a Christian land. Neglected son of genius, I take thee by the hand. Emily Dickinson. The dark form ran toward him with incredible swiftness. When it came near, he saw that there was a kind of face on the squat ebon body. Low down amid several jointed legs, the face peered up with a weird expression of doubt and inquiry. The terror crawled through the veins of the bold huntsman, and he had met the small crafty eyes that were circled about with hair. This may be a little bit of a shorter episode. I do not have a huge sum of knowledge or resources, or knowledge resources, to really research Atlatna Cha. Unfortunately, Atlatna Cha only appears in a few stories here and there, but the stories that we do have, we know this. Atlatna Cha, much like Tsathoggua, originally comes from Saturn. Atlatna Cha is not a spider or an arachnid, but just happens to have 8 legs, roughly in the same manner that a spider has them around its body. Atlatna Cha also weaves a web from the waking world to the dreaming world. When that web is finished, the world will end. According to some sources, Atlatna Cha was responsible for helping many beings escape from Saturn to Earth millions and millions of years ago. How did Atlatna Cha accomplish this? Webs. Big ol' spider webs. Although Atlatna Cha is not a spider, it spins webs. It's interesting, but it's true. Atlatna Cha can weave a web from Saturn to Earth that the likes of Tsathoggua and his family can use. Here's the thing that made me think, though. What if the webs aren't webs like we would think of webs, but spoken of as like a bridge over a chasm? What if this is some sort of misinterpreted data from the wizard Ibon and his contemporaries, that what they call a web is more of like a bridge of some sort. And once all the bridges are built, reality will cease to exist, reality as we know it, because it won't be the waking world and the dreaming world. It'll all be one. There will be no distances that will be distant. Time and space will become one thing. What if Alatna Cha recognizes the fact that many, many great old ones are trapped in four-dimensional space, and what Alatna Cha is doing is either rendering 3 dimensions, I don't know, obsolete, or maybe bringing about the end. You know, linking up all those stars. Making the stars right. Who's to say? There's handfuls of stories here and there about Alatna Cha. My favorite, and the very first, I believe, is Clark Ashton Smith from 1933-1934's The Seven Gish. Yes, that is how the word is pronounced. It's not Gies, it's Gish. Anyhow, we follow the brave huntsman, Razabu Vos. Rabavlu Zos. It's Rabavu. It's one of those. Look it up. Anyway, and Alatna Cha is just nothing more than a threshold guardian for Vus. And a funny one at that.
I found the names and familiar ones, awful descriptions, and mere hints of terror unimaginable in the accounts of Yig, the terrible snake god, of Alatna Cha, of the spider shape, of Nofhek, the hairy thing otherwise known as Ran-Tagoth, of Shonarfon, the vampiric feeder, of the hellhounds of Tindros, which prowl the angles of time, and again of the monstrous Yog-Sothoth, the all-in-one, the one-in-all, whose deceptive disguise as a congeries of iridescent globes concealing the primal horror beneath.
August Derleth, no scratch of Lovecraft whatsoever, lurker at the threshold. So we see Clark Ashton Smith wasn't the only one to talk about Alatna Cha. Lovecraft talked about Alatna Cha, Derleth talked about Alatna Cha, and even I don't want to call them pretenders of the crown of weird fiction, but I guess the alkalites of Cthulhu have written of Alatna Cha as well. Alatna Cha continues to be written about, and I would talk more about those, except for the fact that I do not have rights or permissions from such writers, and never received any emails back. Oh, the writer who doesn't respond back to the podcaster lacks sales. So if you're looking to get a book sold, if you're looking to get some more eyes on your book, whether it be electronic or, I don't know, one of those manual handheld sort of things, People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos, pgttcm.com. Hit the contact button, email DB Spitzer, and find out what he can do for you. Reading one of your books, telling people about how cool it is. One of these days, people will send me free books, and it will be rad. But until then, I guess I'm just going to keep on begging. Alatna Cha. It's pretty cool. May or may not be a lady. Probably doesn't matter, because when it comes to eldritch things, I don't think it matters. One thing that does matter is the fact that Alatna Cha lived in Mount Vormith Adreth, along with Sathagwa and many, many others. The Vormi, some necromancer, some weirdos who live way, way deep in there. Aboth, Alatna Cha, Sathagwa, all those. Big old mountain full of monsters.
Are you an author or a publisher? Do you write weird tales or anything to do with the Cthulhu mythos? Do you want people to find out about what you're writing? Then contact me at pgttcm.com. Got a contact page, you can get in touch with me. or track me down on Facebook or Twitter. It's how I talk to a lot of publishers as is currently. Alright. Spiders.
The Hive. Part 2 of the Last Look trilogy, I believe is what it's going to be called, which will be released by Pantheon Books October 4th. Charles Burns, X'd Out, The Hive, Sugar Skull, all one book. And that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about part 2 in the series, The Hive. We talked about the first part, which was about a guy named Doug, who is medicated in some way or another. Some sort of head injury. It's kind of not quite explained. But he lives in a dream world, but also occupies the real world, but also has flashbacks. What's going on is still just as confusing, and it even points out that fact. Doug's dream world character, who looks like Tintin, at some point in time is gathering old romance magazines for one of, I don't know what to call them other than hive mothers, egg producers? I'm getting ahead of myself. But she points out the fact that it's really weird that there's a gap in her, there must be a gap in the issues that she has, because it goes from him being in a relationship, or a character in the romance comics that she's looking at, being in a relationship and everything's going well, and the next has a head injury and isn't doing so great and is all alone and isolated. Spoiler alerts. Kinda what's going on in the comic, in Doug's world. Goes a little bit more into Doug's dad, and it goes a little bit more into the dream world life, and it starts to become a little bit harder to distinguish what is and what is not the dream world. Is the guy who is in the weird world with lizard people and big red and white eggs and ghoul people, is that the dream world? Does Doug occupy both at the same time? Is one less real than the other? I'm not 100% sure about this. And I'm looking really, really forward to finishing Candy Skull sometime in the next 2-3 weeks. Sugar Skull. It's called Sugar Skull. Candy Skull's the headphones. But I still have to continue to recommend this series from Charles Burns.
Doug wants to tell his story. Get it all off his chest. But there's a dark, sad secret from his past that he just can't face up to yet. The story that began in X'd Out continues.
But yeah, it continues to be the fever dream. I know I tend to call several comics that I like, several graphic novels that I like, to be like fever dreams, but I guess that's what I like. And if you like just visually enthralling, intricate comic books, I highly, highly recommend The Hive. Charles Burns is one of the greatest, in my opinions. He's right up there with Art Spiegelman and Dan Clowes, Jack Kirby, those guys. It's just a very solid style that I enjoy. As I've called it before, there's something about it in some of Charles Burns' style that reminds me of lino cuts. There's no instruction on how to make a lino cut this time, but yeah. All right, that was The Hive.
Just a reminder, you can find People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos at pgttcm.com. We're available on Twitter and Facebook under pgttcm. You can also support the show by going to patreon.com/pgttcm. audibletrial.com pgttcm is a great way to support the show as well, and also get yourself a free audiobook. Would you like to sponsor a podcast? Are you a publisher and want to sell some books? Want to give me something to read while I'm riding the train? pgttcm.com/contact. All right, now back to the show. From June to August 1919 in Hamburg, director Fritz Lang created the first part of the Spider films. He was accepted to direct a mystery action serial of 4 parts. He was forced to relinquish his duties as the director on the cabinet of Dr. Caligari and was assigned Die Spinnen. The primary characters of the film are the adventurer Kay Hogue, played by Karl de Voigt, Sun Princess Nalia by Lil Dagover, Liao Shah by Russell Orla, Dr. Telfas by George John, Diamond King John Terry, Rudolph Ledinger. For a long time, this was considered a lost film. It wasn't until the 1970s that more of the film was discovered, and they were able to piece enough of it back together to create the first and only 2 films of this series. This series, looking back at it now, this series seems a lot like old DuckTales episodes, Pokemon episodes, adventures, just like straight up adventure stories, like old pulps and old adventure comic strips and old comic books. There's no strong supernatural, there's no science fiction. It's not terribly fantastical, more misinformed than anything else. Maybe a little bit of mysticism, but it's just a straight up adventure story. No one has any high-tech gadgets. It's just strength and intellect versus strength and intellect. Cunning and guile versus, I don't know, Prussian ideals. This is a German film, Weimar Republic, a couple years after the German defeat. So let's just get into this. Die Spinnen is an adventure film, and in 2 parts. Die Spinnen der Golden See, which means the Golden Lake, but is generally known as the Golden Sea. And Die Spinnen, if you haven't figured it out, it means the spiders. And that's what this episode's about. Spiders. So we have Kay Hogue, who is a well-known adventurer and sportsman from San Francisco that finds a message in a bottle. The message in the bottle is from a mad Harvard professor who's gone missing, and it has a map on it. I wouldn't say he's necessarily mad, but let's just say he's gone mad. So we have a professor from Massachusetts who's lost on an expedition who casts a bottle out to the sea hoping that someone will find it. We then have an adventurer and sportsman who then finds it and then tells his adventuring club that he is going to go find the Harvard professor and use the map to find a lost Incan civilization that has much treasure. He tells everyone about this, and unfortunately, Liao Shah, she is part of a crime syndicate known as the Spiders, or Die Spinnen, which then gets together, and her and Dr. Telfas, which honestly, every time I see those 2 together, I will have to say I do get kind of a Jesse and James Team Rocket from the Pokemon cartoons. They're just, I don't know. I just get a feeling that they're on this side of competent, but they start a rival expedition to the lost Incan civilization. Both parties travel from San Francisco and find the farthest the railway system will lead them through Mexico. The Spinnen approach a bar and are pretty much like $20 for any men willing to shoot at some guy from San Francisco. And, you know, all those tough hombres are like, yeah, we'll do it, lady. When they get to the Golden Lake, Hogue saves an Incan princess and falls in love with her. She then later, because he saved her, is able to save him from Incan priests and, make it so that Liao Shah doesn't die. She's beautiful and dangerous. They say so in the movie. After Neela helps him escape from the Incans, he ends up discovering a mysterious clue about something called the Diamond Ship, which makes the spiders and Leo Shah just freak out bad. But that doesn't stop Liao Shah from declaring her love for Kay, which Kay just is pretty much like, nopes. I'm totally all about Nalia, and there's more, but I'm not going to give away the end of a movie. I mean, yeah, spoiler alerts and stuff are, 20 years after a movie comes out, shouldn't have to say spoiler alerts, but giving away the end of a movie, even if it's 100 years old, that's still kind of a jerk thing to do. I'm going to highly recommend you get on the, YouTubes and look up The Spider, or as it's known in German, The Speinen. And definitely watch the first half. And if you feel like sitting through and watching the second half, it is good as well. And it is also the return of Kay Hogue. And Liao Shah returns, but I believe she does, because it wouldn't be that great of a serial if she didn't. But, as I may have said before, this is a 100-year-old film, pretty much. In 2 years' time, this will be a 100-year-old film. Stories have come a long way. How stories are told have come a long way. Pacing. I mean, this is closer to the pulps than it is to a movie. It just happens to have a visual element to it. The story telling, the pacing. It's not. It shares some things with a contemporary movie, but not much. This story could have been told in 22 minutes, easily. But because of the fact that they have to show you a lot of things, and only once in a while does dialogue ever get shown on the screen, and that's just to nail home what people's names are and their relations to each other and what exactly is going on. If I was a writer, I would definitely watch this, maybe get some ideas. If I was writing, an adventure, if I was writing, if I was a game designer, I would watch this and I might get ideas for an adventure, for a module, for a role-playing game, or for a level if you're a, video game designer. It's pretty cool. It's a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. I had to watch it twice. The first time was a slog, and I was so bored. I only got about 20 minutes into it, and I was like, this is so dumb. So you have to be in the right mindset. I would definitely say you have to be in the right mindset. And if you want to listen to different music than what they have, I highly recommend it, because, it just, not the best music that on the YouTube version that I watched. Anyway, that's it for the spiders. And honestly, that's it for this episode of People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I've been your host, DB Spitzer. Next week, we will be talking about part 2 about this. I think we're also going to be talking about some necromancers and maybe a weird book of some sort. Could be the WeirdBook. I don't know. Hey, did you know that the WeirdBook is back after being out of publication for 17 years? Yeah, it's one of the greatest weird fiction amateur journals of all time. Coming back. They just released issue 32, 42, 72. I don't know. We'll talk about it next time, though. All right. Thank you for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I have been your host, as always, DB Spitzer. Hey, do you know something about podcasting and you want to help? Drop me a line. Do you want to start your own podcast? Drop me a line. Do you want to sponsor a podcast but don't want to actually get your hands dirty? Drop me a line. All right. Thank you so much. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos, pgttcm.com. I just fell down a hole in an Incan city temple.
This has been Check One Check. Check. This has been episode 305 of People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I have been your host, DB Spitzer.
PGTTCM is produced by Portland Public Podcasting. Contact us to find out how to start your own podcast. Thank you.
Los, hab keine Angst, mein Kleiner.
Gestattet uns vorzustellen.
Wir wollen über die Erde regieren.
Und unseren eigenen Staat kreieren.
Liebe und Wahrheit verurteilen wir.
Mehr und mehr Macht, das wollen wir.
Jesse.
Und ich, James.
Team Rocket, so schnell wie das Licht.
Ja, das sind wir. Gebt lieber auf und bekämpft uns nicht.
Thank you for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. If you like what you hear, please consider donating $1 or $5 to patreon.com/PGTTCM. Thank you for your patronage and listening and just generally being a cool person. Did I mention you look very attractive today? Thank you. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos, PGTTCM.com. People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos is hosted by D.B. Spitzer, produced in conjunction with Portland Public Podcasting. To find out how to podcast and learn more about podcasting, go to pgttcm.com/podcasting. Finally, my listeners, the day has come where we get to speak of spiders and skulls made of sugar and books that are weird. Yes, today we will be talking about Charles Burns' Sugar Skull, and we will also be talking about Fritz Lang's Die Spinnen, Part 2, The Brilliant Ship or the Diamond Ship. And, of course, we will be talking about issue 32 of an amazing magazine called WeirdBook, a small press journal of weird fiction that is very, very much on a Cthulhu bender. A Cthulhu bent Mythos magazine? I don't know. Anyway, that's what we're talking about today. So sit back, or I don't know, lean away from the person next to you on the bus. If you're on an airplane, I hope it doesn't crash. And if you're in an elevator, if it starts to fall, jumping at the last moment will not save you. I think I learned that through Bill Nye the Science Guy in the early 90s when he was part of an ensemble cast called Almost Live, produced in Seattle. Anyway, I don't know what that's about. So, let's get started. The Spiders, or Die Spinnen in German, silent serial adventure film written and directed by Fritz Lang, produced in 2 parts in 1919 and 1920. There were more parts that were planned, but those were never made. We talked about this last time for part 1 of Die Spinnen, which was about some Incan treasure, or was it Aztec? Incan treasure, and a traveler named K. Hogue and his entanglements with a criminal group known as Die Spinnen. One of the leaders of this group is the dangerous yet beautiful Liao Sha. So we have this film that it was produced by Fritz Lang, or the production. Fritz Lang was the director. It was pretty early on in his career. He was forced off of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, big mistake, and was pushed onto this project. And it was distributed by Decla Bishop AG in 1919 and 1920. The filming took place, the first part, from June to August in Hamburg
and part 2 was in October to December in Hamburg, and it was primarily filmed in Tierpark Hagenbeck, which is a zoo in Stellinger, Hamburg, which was started in 1863, and it was the first known zoo for having open enclosures surrounded by moats other than barred gates to better off show a animal's natural environment. And also, apparently in the 1900s, early 1900s, a great place to pretend that you are in an exotic foreign place. And they had tigers. So, yeah, this is one of those lost films that was thought lost for a very, very long time. A lot of German film did not make it through World War II, and just the fact that film stock is as flammable as it is. As I said, bits and pieces have been discovered in the 1970s, and a pretty full restoration of the film was completed in 1978. There's a small amount missing here and there, but film historians David and Kimberly Shepard put it together pretty darn well with a music score by Gaylord Carter that I can't say I'm crazy about the music, but I can't say that I'm generally crazy about a lot of music in silent films. Although I will have to say, I was in Eugene, Oregon in 2006, 2007, I think it was, and I got to see Mood Area 51 perform the theatrical score to Nosferatu in a hippie bar that I was later assaulted and then, got my head smashed in and couldn't do basic math for about 4 years. Hit that donate button. Anyway, there were 2 films not produced that were planned, though. Part 3 was Asiens Kasakron, or To Asia's Imperial Crown, and Part 4, Im Spinennetz, in the Spiders Web. Anyway, let's talk about what Part 2 was. Part 2, we have the return of Karl de Vogt as K. Hogue, the good, clean adventurer name of K. Hogue. K. Hogue is I believe, yacht master and world adventurer. We also have Liao Sha, the beautiful and deadly femme fatale of Die Spinnen, played by Russell Orla. And let's see, George John as Dr. Telephas, pretty much the James to Liao Shaw's Jesse. Pokemon reference, not Old West reference. Rudolph Ledinger returns as Diamond King John Terry. And I'm trying to remember... Paul Morgan, who played a diamond expert in Part 1, is cast as Jew. Yeah, that's... Come on, Weimar Republic. Anyway, let's talk about the film itself. In the search of a Buddha head-shaped diamond that has special powers, carried in the hands of a princess, it will bestow the power to rule Asia. In San Francisco, Hogue discovers a hidden city beneath Chinatown, but is found and taken prisoners by the spiders. It is an underground city guarded by tigers and full of illegal casinos and opium dens. K. Hogue is procured while eavesdropping on Liao Sha, who just chartered a sailing vessel. The spiders' plan is to track down the huge diamond in the form of a Buddha's head to find that its owner's jurisdiction over all Asia to lend. Hogue is captured and put into a box on this brilliant or diamond ship and trace the diamond all the way to India and then to the diamond magnate John Terry in London. Later, Hogue is freed from the ship as he escapes, but not before finding, with the help of an ancient logbook, that the Diamond King's ancestors concealed a map in a painting. K. Hogue follows the map to the Falkland Islands to find the diamond. But Four-Finger John, who is spied on the Diamond King and Hogue, manages to inform the spiders by carrier pigeon. Liao Shaw and her henchmen catch up with Hogue in the cave where the pirate treasure is hidden and take him prisoner. I'm not going to tell you how the movie ends. You have to sit through an hour of silent film and figure that out for yourself. Alls I will say, there are some poisonous gases, a volcano, more stuff with England, hypnotists. So I guess that's part 2 of Die Spinnen. I'm a huge fan of Weimar-era silent film. I'm a big fan of Weimar-era music, film, art. It's great. The interbellum of a society is always a tenuous and interesting thing to look at, not to live in. I would never want to live in a country that has pretty much fallen down around its ankles because of wars. That's not a good place to be. Reconciliation, reconstruction. I imagine it. I can't imagine. I was going to say I imagine it would be like living in the post-apocalypse, but it's like I really can't imagine what it would be like. Yeah, I'm not going to have any political messages about do this or do that or this will happen. That's not what we're here about. We're here about literature. We're here about film. We're here about comic books. This is a podcast about space monsters. It's never going to get too serious. If you ever want to suggest something that I could watch, read, let me know, and I'll try and get in touch with the publishers and find that book, watch that movie, and talk about it. So if you'd like me to talk about any specific graphic novel, if you have a book that you've written, I'd prefer, I'd prefer a physical copy, as I can take it on the train with me. And I don't have an iPad, so it's kind of hard for me to read ebooks right now when I'm traveling, and I travel a lot just because I do. If you have something, let me know. I'll read it. I'll talk about it. It's sales for you, and it's content for me. All right, Die Spinnen. Up next, let's get weird. So, who wants to get weird? Are you familiar with a little publication called WeirdBook? WeirdBook is a irregularly printed, not in size and shape. It's a large format, small press magazine, but it's usually an annual, except for when it's canceled or suspended. Not suspended like, in trouble, but like, just not being produced. But it's usually annually. It started in April 1968 and is still being published. The original publisher and editor was W. Paul Gainley, and who is now functioning as the consulting editor is W. Paul Gainley. The editor is Doug Draw, and the production manager is Steve Coop. It has been out of print for a while, but now it's back in print. It's an amateur, let me tell you what it is. It's an amateur magazine of like a old school kind of like, I don't know, I would say like the types that HPL used to write to as a young man. It is more of a production of love than any sort of possible commercial achievement. If you do anything like produce a magazine, or a film festival, or a series of books, or a podcast about the Cthulhu mythos, you know there is no commercial reward. This is done out of love. Twice, Weird Magazine has received the World Fantasy Awards in 1987 and 1992. It's kind of roughly based off of the whole feel and layout of Weird Tales and those sorts of pulp magazines. Generally full of short horror stories and of a cosmic nature, science fiction themed, maybe a little bit of fantasy for the necromancers, or, kind of like Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, H.P. Lovecraftian type stuff. But there has also been some unpublished work of Robert E. Howard put into it. Generally, it is, an amateur press. A lot of supernatural fiction and fantasy. In the past, such writers as L. Sprague de Camp, Dennis Eckelson, Joe R. Lansdale, Brian Lumley, other names that you may know, like Daryl Schweitzer. Pretty much all regulars, or were regulars at a period of time. The 10th anniversary and the 20th anniversary, 1977 and 1988, were printed as a hardcover. And, yeah. That's what I have to say about WeirdBook. I don't have any specifics on why it stopped being printed. As I said, I'm going to guess it was probably due to financial reasons. As I said before, Cthulhu Mythos, there's people who love it, but there's not a lot of money in it. Why it generally costs so much, because we can't produce things in large, huge batches. So if you want Cthulhu Mythos stuff to be cheaper, tell your friends about it. Get your friends hooked. Tell more people. Spread the word of Cthulhu. And don't just spread the word of Cthulhu. People who just like Cthulhu be like, whatever, don't you know about Sathagwa? Isn't Azathoth more powerful than Cthulhu? Be a dick about it. No, I'm kidding. That's not how you make friends. That's how you, single yourself out as an asshole. Don't do that. We don't want you to single yourself as an asshole. We want you to be part of the community. We want you to bring other people into the community. And you know who has a good community? WeirdBook. Oh, hey, see how I did that? Okay, WeirdBook, great. I didn't even know about WeirdBook until a few, months ago or so. And I was looking through WeirdBook 31, and I thought to myself, why am I not contacting these people? Why haven't I contacted Khal Drogo or, no, that's not his name. Peter Droog? No, I'm not doing this on purpose, I swear. Doug Draw. Khal Drogo, jeez. So, Doug Draw, yes. I've been emailing him from Germany. Or he's been emailing me from Germany just to hey, glad you could talk about us. Or, hey, glad you're going to want to talk about us. And I like it. It's fun. But, I'll tell you, the smell of magazines, having magazines in your hand, books piling up around you, I love that feeling. My pile of books for books I plan on reviewing for the podcast increases. As I find things at garage sales, as I go to old bookstores throughout Southeast Portland, the one that everyone talks about. Don't go to the one downtown. That one's for tourists. Go to the one in Southeast Portland off of Hawthorne. They've got an amazing Lovecraft collection and mythos stuff in general, and their gaming books are pretty tight. And I like to go to that one and slip my business cards into various mythos books. Oh yeah. So let's get back to WeirdBook. So WeirdBook 32, pretty awesome magazine. I have to say, if 31 was awesome, 32's been awesome as well. And there's authors that you know in it. There's media personas that you know in it. A Canadian by the name of Kessler. He's in it. Is it Liam Kessler? Or is it Lemur Kessler? I don't know. I'm awful with Canadian names. There is some Daryl Schweitzer in there, who you may recall is the guy who called me out on my, haphazard editing and, orating about weird tales. Hopefully he won't take me to task about a magazine that he's actually appeared in. WeirdBook. So, yeah, he's been in this magazine for several decades. Congrats. I think that's really awesome to be part of something that long and contribute. And Brian Lumley, no matter what I've said about him and his Cathoans, yeah. It's a good magazine. I highly recommend it. I know I keep saying I highly recommend it, but I do. Being put out by Wildside Press these days, it's nice. It's nice to have all these people in one spot. You can just you don't have to pick up. You can get it in WeirdBook now or find it in an anthology down the road. I'd rather get it now and then get it later in the anthology. I'm kind of a completist when it comes to collecting stuff like this, but a really bad completist. So yeah, no, I'm not a completist at all. I'm a hoarder. I'm a hoarder when it comes to stuff like this. Feed my addiction, people. Send me your books and magazines. Let's see if we can fill up my tiny room with books. So let's talk about what you're going to find in WeirdBook. You're going to find fiction and poetry. Fiction and poetry. But no, short fiction and even shorter fiction. And we've got all kinds of different people. As I said, we've got some P.R. O'Leary. Oh, I didn't say that before, but we've got some Lehman Kessler. Geez, why was I saying Liam? Lehman Kessler. We've got some Liam Kessler in here. We've got some Daryl Schweitzer. We've got some K.A. Opperman. A bunch of other names you're going to know. A bunch of other names that are very familiar to you. And if you spend any time reading any modern mythos fiction, you may have read some of these stories. I don't know if they're all brand new or if some of them are from other collections or have appeared elsewhere. Poetry has some pretty awesome names like Necromancer's Lair by Chad Hensley. There is The Helm, also by Chad Hensley. What Dark Gods Are Friends to Me, also by Chad Hensley. Laughter of the Ghouls by K.A. Opperman. Penelope's Sleepless by Daryl Schweitzer. And the fiction has some pretty good names, and these are good reads. There's no dogs, no turds in this collection. That's always nice when you can go through and be like, okay, how long is this? You know, when you start reading a story and you're like, okay, how long is this? How much time do I have to spend? Is this a waste of my time? Do I just need to skip to the next story? Or do I need to wait this story out and just continue to read it? Not the case here. Rare Air by Mark Slade. It's good. Children by J.E. Almo. Awesome. Radiant Boy by Kevin Weltmore. Awesome. I mean, Whisper in the Woods. Peter Schranz. I mean, that's just a cool name. I mean, Peter Schranz, yeah, but A Whisper in the Woods. Ooh, very Lovecraftian. The Black Carnival by Bobby Cranestone. Jorogumo by Kendra Critch. I hope I'm saying that right. Clay Baby? Jack Taylor? I mean, I don't want to... This is the thing about horror stories, about Cthulhu mythos. It's... You don't want to... I feel the same way about the Cthulhu mythos and stories within the Cthulhu mythos that I do about most movies. It's best if I don't even see the trailer, if I don't know anything about it, if I'm going in open, if someone just says, just see it, you'll like it. I know you and you'll like it. If you like this podcast and you like the other stuff that I've mentioned, book-wise, not necessarily movie or graphic novel, you're going to like WeirdBook. If you've liked WeirdBook in the past, I'm going to assume that you'll like this current this current version of it. The covers are a lot slicker looking. Although I say if you go back through the history of WeirdBook and look at the covers are very representative of a small press magazine. There are periods of times in the 60s and 70s where it looks like Dungeons and Dragons art, because that's pretty much what it is. I don't know if it's the same people. I haven't delved into that much. If any of you know this, if any of you know more about WeirdBook and want to tell me what I've missed, corrections, omissions, and just I don't know, whatever. All right. Enough of this WeirdBook stuff. I don't have anything else. Except for The Road to Hell by Kevin L. O'Brien. Read it. Mega Coffee by Roy C. Booth and Axel Kogan. And WeirdBook 32. I recommend it. And no, not all those stories that I read and mentioned are like stellar, like the most amazing short fiction you've ever read in your life, but you're going to enjoy it. You might even go, you know what? I should write. I should be a writer. And if you do, I don't know, WeirdBook would be a good place to send your stuff. I'm sure, they'd love to see it. If you have a magazine like WeirdBook and you want to tell me about it, if you have just a small press book, not even necessarily Lovecraftian horror, if it's just cosmic horror or fiction, science fiction, whatever, send it my way. I'll talk about it. I love that kind of stuff. And if you want to send me a physical copy, I'll talk about it a whole bunch. Let's talk about Sugar Skull, part 3 of the Last Look trilogy. X'd Out and The Hive being the books that were published previously in this 3-part series, trilogy. Sugar Skull follows up
where the Hive left off. We have the dream world of Doug, which is inhabited by his art performance persona Johnny 23, a Tintin-like rubber-masked, naive young man, Johnny 23. Doug isn't too much better himself. We kind of learn what Doug's deal is, why Doug has, in various points, kind of like bandaging on his head. We find out more about what Doug's life is, why he's having these bizarre fever dreams. And again, we're still not sure. Is some little Tintin guy trapped in a world that he doesn't understand, that isn't necessarily his own? Is he dreaming about being a normal schlubby guy who hides out in his father's office when the girl that he likes comes to visit? Or is Doug having messed up dreams, dreaming that he's his old art school performance persona, Johnny 23, using bizarre dreams to deal with and reconcile with the state that his life's in, the poor choices that he's made, or the choices that he wasn't able to make due to the fact that he had several ribs broken, some head trauma, and just a lot of awfulness. What's he hiding? There's something else. There's something that he's not telling you. Yes, he wants you to think that he's a victim. He wants you to feel that something bad happened. Did he do something shitty? Is that what all the guilt's about? Is something bad happen with his father? You have to read it to find out. But based off of the dream world, Johnny has issues with vaginas. Doug has issues with vaginas. Doug has issues with childbirth. Johnny has issues with childbirth. Saving the woman that they think needs to be saved, when in all actuality, she can take care of herself and doesn't need someone trying to save her. It's part 3. It's Sugar Skull. It's the same amazing writing and brilliant illustration that we've come to know and love by Charles Burns. As I've mentioned, October 4th, this will all be part of a trilogy called Last Look, and I highly recommend that you look at it, or at least buy it for someone that you know as a gift, and then peruse it. Make 2 people happy at once. 3 if you consider the publishing house. Hey, 4 if you consider Charles Burns. But I'm not trying to get you guys to buy books. I'm getting you guys to read books, hopefully. And I just want to take a few moments and talk about the author, Charles Burns. Charles Burns, like myself, is from the Pacific Northwest. Grew up in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, to be honest. But Charles Burns grew up in Seattle in the 70s. If you read his phenomenal collection, Black Hole, it's very apparent that he grew up in Seattle in the 70s. His work came into prominence in Art Spiegelman's Raw magazine during the 80s. Art Spiegelman, who's known for Mouse and Garbage Pail Kid cards. Quite a juxtaposition. And Charles Burns has been pretty much known for graphic novels, set design, campaigns for ads, and album covers. His artwork has been featured in Time, The New Yorker, The New York Times, and also the cover for The Believer. I think I have that cover. And you can also check out other stuff that he's done, like Black Hole and, trying to remember the other ones. What is it? Big Baby. I'm not trying to push his other work. I will highly say check out Sugar Skull, and I'll read the back of this because I've read the back of all of the other books. The long, strange trip that began in X-Stout and continued in the Hive reaches its mind-bending, heart-breaking end. But not before Doug is forced to deal with the lie that he's been telling himself since the beginning. In this concluding volume, nightmarish dreams evolve into even more dreadful reality. The feeling of dread Burns evokes into the Hive is quite something. Now on Earth, will Burns tie up all of the carefully planned loose ends? The Guardian, a news outlet from the UK that I personally go for unbiased news coverage in the US. But I've come to find there is no such thing. So that's it for Sugar Skull. I can't think of anything else I have to say about Sugar Skull other than I enjoyed it. It was fun. It wasn't Black Hole. It wasn't a Velvet Glove cast in iron. I know, that's not Charles Burns, that's Dan Klaus, and you can't compare apples to oranges. I enjoyed it, but I didn't walk around with this like profound feeling. I didn't feel like I learned something about myself or those around me. Anything I had to learn from Charles Burns from this trilogy, I already knew about myself. I'm a damaged piece of shit with a head injury. But hey, I'm not as shitty as Doug.
It's the end of the show. It's the end of the show. I don't have any mailbag. It's the end of the show. No one's written me for a while. If you want to write me. You can write me at facebook.com/PGTTCM. Or if you want to do it in 140 characters, you can contact me at Twitter /PGTTCM or on Tumblr. I don't have an email address set up because I don't want spam. But if you contact me through any other way that I mentioned previously, I'll get to you. I'll definitely get to you. Just address it. If you want it specifically for mailbag, yeah. If you, I don't know, want to send me something, contact me. If you've got books for me, contact me. If you've got graphic novels, contact me. If you have a horror movie that you've made that you want me to see that you have on YouTube or something, send it to me. Send it. Send me a link. I am interested in what you have as art projects, as literary projects, and life projects. So write me, tell me what's going on. If you're in Poland, if you're in Iceland, if you're in Germany, if you're in Norway, Australia, Austria, Great Britain, anywhere in the UK, I don't know. The Welsh, no, I'm kidding. I love the Welsh. The Welsh are great. I get confused as Dutch, Welsh, and Polish constantly. And there's a reason for that. But you, anywhere in the world, if you can understand what I'm saying, write me a letter. I don't care if your English is good or bad. Just know that I speak no other languages other than English. I used to know a little bit of kitchen Spanish, and that's enough Spanish to get by in a kitchen when you're, working in a kitchen. And I took several years of Japanese in high school. But, alas, I'm an American, and I only speak one language, and that is terrible English. Okay, so next time, I'm not sure what I've got planned for next time because my notebook with my stuff in it is all the way on the other side of my desk underneath a cup of coffee. And I'm going to pick up this cup of coffee and I'm going to drink out of it. But I shall not reveal the next episode. That'll be a surprise. Thank you so much for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I have been your host, DB Spitzer. Remember, patreon.com/PGTTCM. I am in a panic mode due to the fact that there may not be a next episode due to the fact that I have about $200 in my bank account. I live in the utility room in my parents' house, and I haven't been able to have a job, or I haven't found a job that pays decent money in over 3 years. Thank you so much for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, etc. Thank you so much. And why don't you go to pgttcm.com, click on some of those links, join some of those things, get stuff. I get some money that I can throw at the podcast and, get better equipment. All right. Enough of me pestering you. You don't want to hear my sob story. So, what are you listening to next on your podcast? Can I make some recommendations? I'm going to say blurry photos. I'm going to say Visitor's Guide to Springfield. I'm going to say Cult Film Club. And yeah, those are my recommendations. Awesome people. with awesome, awesome podcasts. And if I'm going to say, you need to listen to this big fancy podcast, I'm going to say, how did this get made for big fancy podcasts? And I'm going to recommend Stuff You Missed in History. Awesome, awesome podcast. All right, listen to my podcast. Listen to those ones if you want to. And if you made it this far, you are a hero. You've made it to the end. Again, if you have something I should say at the end of my show to let everyone know that the show is over and wish everyone an awesome whatever, please, I will take those suggestions. And also, you know what? Something to say at the beginning of the show. If you want to create some bookends for me, or not create them, but, tell me, hey, say this at the beginning and say this at the end. I'll do it. If you want me to do it each week, different one, I'll do it. Just send them to me. I'll figure it out. All right. I gotta go eat some corn dogs and taquitos, because, I have the dietary habits of a 7-year-old left alone. Actually, I think that would be starvation. Bye.